Friends, I have for you today William Shakespeare's famous play Hamlet. Hamlet is Shakespeare's longest play and is considered among the most powerful and influential works of world literature, with a story capable of being retold and adapted by others. It was one of Shakespeare's most popular works during his lifetime and still ranks among his most performed, topping the performance list of the Royal Shakespeare Company and its predecessors in Stratford upon Avon since 1879. It has inspired many other writers from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and Charles Dickens to James Joyce to Iris Murdoch, and has been described as the world's most filmed story of after Cinderella. Hindi film Haider was, which was released in 2014, is a modern day adaptation of Shakespeare's tragedy Hamlet. So friends, let me quickly take you through the plot of this particular play. Kindly be attentive as there are many characters in this play. We start with Act 1. In the Act 1, Prince Hamlet of Denmark happens to be the main protagonist of this play. He is the son of the recently deceased or killed King Hamlet. So essentially there are two characters by the name of Hamlet in this particular play. Then you have King Claudius, who is Hamlet's uncle and his father's brother, and also the successor. After the death of King Hamlet, Claudius hastily marries his widow. Her name is Gertrude, who is also Hamlet's mother and occupies the throne himself. The play goes on to say that the country of Denmark has a long-standing feud with neighboring Norway, in which King Hamlet had once killed King Fortinbras of Norway in a battle some years ago. Although Denmark defeated Norway and the Norwegian throne fell to King Fortinbras' infirm brother, Denmark does fear that a retaliation led by dead Norwegian king's son, Prince Fortinbras, as imminent. Then the scene changes to a cold night on the ramparts of Elsinore, the Danish royal castle, where the sentries Bernardo and Marcellus discussed a ghost resembling the late King Hamlet, which they have recently seen, and bring Prince Hamlet's friend Horatio as a witness. After the ghost appears again, the three vow to tell Prince Hamlet what they have witnessed. As the court gathers the next day, while King Claudius and Queen Gertrude discuss affairs of the state with their elderly advisor Polonius, where Hamlet looks on glumly. During the court, Claudius grants permission for Polonius' son Laertes to return to school in France, and also sends envoys to inform the King of Norway about Fortinbras. Claudius also scolds Hamlet for continuing to grieve over his father's death and refuses him permission to return to his schooling in Wittenberg. After the court exits, Hamlet despairs on his father's death and his mother's hasty remarriage. Learning of the ghost from Horatio, Hamlet resolves to see it himself. As Polonius' son, Laertes prepares to depart for a visit to France when Polonius gives him a contradictory advice that culminates in that famous ironic maxim, "To thine own self be true," meaning he must think of his own benefit first. Meanwhile, Polonius' daughter Ophelia admits her interest in Hamlet, but Laertes warns her against seeking the prince's attention, and Polonius orders her to reject his advances. That night, on the rampart, the ghost reappears in Hamlet's presence, telling the prince that he was murdered by Claudius, his own brother, and demands that Hamlet avenge him. Hamlet agrees, and the ghost disappears. The prince confides to Horatio and the sentries that from now on he plans to put an antic disposition on or act as though he has gone mad, and forces them to swear to keep his plans for revenge a secret, but privately, however, he remains uncertain of the ghost's reliability. Now we come to Act 2. Ophelia rushes to her father, telling him that Hamlet arrived at her door the prior night, half undressed and behaving erratically. Polonius blames love for Hamlet's madness and resolves to inform Claudius and Gertrude. But as he enters to do so, he finds the king and queen finish welcoming Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, two student acquaintances of Hamlet, at Elsinore, the royal palace. The royal couple requests that the students investigate the cause of Hamlet's mood and his behavior. In the meanwhile, some additional news requires that Polonius waits further to be heard. When messengers from Norway inform Claudius that the king of Norway has rebuked Prince Fortinbras for attempting to refight his father's battles. The forces that Fortinbras had drafted to march against Denmark will now be sent to Poland, though they will pass through the Danish territory to get there. Polonius tells Claudius and Gertrude his theory regarding Hamlet's behavior, and he speaks to Hamlet in a hall in the castle to try to uncover more information. Hamlet feigns madness, but subtly insults Polonius all along. When Rosencrantz and Guildenstern arrive, Hamlet greets his friends warmly, but quickly discerns that they are spies. Hamlet becomes bitter, admitting that he is upset at his situation, but refuses to give the true reason why. Instead, he comments on what a piece of work humanity is. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern tell Hamlet that they have brought along a troupe of actors that they met while traveling to Elsinore. Hamlet, after welcoming the actors and dismissing his friends turned spies, asks them to deliver a soliloquy about the death of King Priam and Queen Hecuba at the climax of Trojan War. Impressed by the delivery of speech, he plots to stage the murder of Gonzago, a play featuring a death in the style of his father's murder that reminds me of the last song of Rishi Kapoor starring film Curse, to determine the truth of the ghost story, as well as Claudius's guilt or innocence by studying Claudius's reaction. Act 3 now. Polonius forces Ophelia to return Hamlet's love letters and tokens of affection to Prince, while he and Claudius watch from afar to evaluate Hamlet's reaction. Hamlet is walking alone in the hall as the king and Polonius await Ophelia's entrance, musing whether to be or not to be. The famous quote, "To be or not to be." This is that famous phrase which means to act or not to act. When Ophelia enters and tries to return Hamlet's things, Hamlet accuses her of immodesty and cries, "Get thee to a nunnery," which means give her to the whorehouse. Though it is unclear whether this too is a show of madness or genuine distress. His reaction convinces Claudius that Hamlet is not mad for love. Shortly thereafter, the court assembles to watch the play that Hamlet has commissioned, in which, after seeing the protagonist's king being murdered by his rival by pouring poison in his ear, Claudius abruptly rises and runs away from the room. I'm sorry. For Hamlet, this indeed is a positive proof of his uncle's guilt, after which Gertrude, his mother, summons Hamlet to her room to demand an explanation. Meanwhile, Claudius talks to himself about the impossibility of repenting, since he still has possession of his ill-gotten goods, that is, his brother's crown and his wife. He sinks to his knees in frustration. Meanwhile, Hamlet, on his way to visit his mother, sneaks up behind Claudius but does not kill him. reason that killing Claudius while he is praying will send him straight to heaven while his father's ghost is still stuck in purgatory. Friends, purgatory, according to belief of some Christians, is an intermediate state after physical death for expiatory purification. In the Queen's bedchamber, Hamlet and Gertrude fight bitterly where Polonius spies on the conversation from behind a tapestry, calls for help as Gertrude, believing Hamlet wants to kill her, calls out for help herself. Hamlet, believing it is Claudius behind the tapestry, stabs wildly, but in the process he kills Polonius. He pulls aside the curtain and discovers his mistake. In a rage, Hamlet brutally insults his mother for apparent ignorance of Claudius's villainy, but just then King Hamlet's ghost enters and reprimands Prince Hamlet for his inaction and harsh words. Unable to see or hear the ghost herself, Gertrude takes Hamlet's conversation with the ghost as a further evidence of his madness. After begging the queen to stop sleeping with Claudius, Hamlet leaves, dragging Polonius's corpse away. Act 4. Hamlet jokes with Claudius about where he has hidden Polonius's body, and the king, fearing his life, sends Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to accompany Hamlet to England with a sealed letter to the English king requesting him that Hamlet be executed immediately. Shocked by grief at Polonius's death, Ophelia wanders aimlessly around Elsinore. Meanwhile, Laertes returns from France, enraged by his father's death and his sister's madness. Claudius convinces Laertes that Hamlet is solely responsible for the killing, but a letter soon arrives indicating that Hamlet has returned to Denmark, foiling Claudius's plan. Claudius switches tactics, proposing a fencing match, a kind of a sword fight between Laertes and Hamlet to settle their differences. Laertes will be given a poison-tipped sword, and Claudius will offer Hamlet poisoned wine as a congratulation if that fails. Gertrude interrupts to report that Ophelia has drowned, though it is unclear whether it is a suicide or an accident exacerbated by her madness. In the meanwhile, Horatio has received a letter from Hamlet explaining that the prince escaped by negotiating with the pirates who attempted to attack his England-bound ship, and the friends reunite offstage. Two grave diggers discuss Ophelia's apparent suicide while digging her grave. Hamlet arrives with Horatio and banters with one of the grave diggers, who unearths the skull of a court jester or a joker, you could say, from Hamlet's childhood that he loved. His name was Yorick. Hamlet picks up the skull, saying, "Alas, poor Yorick," as he thinks of death. Meanwhile, Ophelia's funeral procession approaches, led by Laertes. Hamlet and Horatio initially hide, but when Hamlet realizes that Ophelia is the one who is likely to be buried, he reveals himself, proclaiming his love for her. Laertes and Hamlet fight by Ophelia's graveside, but the brawl is soon broken upon. Back at Elsinore, Hamlet explains to Horatio that he had discovered Claudius's letter in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's belongings, that he had replaced it with a forged copy, indicating that his former friends instead should be killed. Instead of Hamlet should be killed. A foppish courtier by the name of Osric interrupts the conversation to deliver the fencing challenge to Hamlet. Hamlet, despite Horatio's pleas, accepts it. Hamlet does well at first, leading the match by 2-1 when Gertrude raises a toast to him using the poisoned glass of wine Claudius had set aside for Hamlet. Claudius tries to stop her, but is too late in doing so. She drinks, and Laertes realizes the plot will now be revealed. Laertes slashes Hamlet with his poisoned blade. In the ensuing scuffle, they switch weapons when Hamlet wounds Laertes with his own poisoned sword. In the meantime, Gertrude collapses and, claiming she has been poisoned, she dies. Further, in his dying moments, Laertes reconciles with Hamlet and reveals Claudius's plan. Hamlet rushes at Claudius and kills him. And as the poison takes effect, Hamlet, upon hearing that Fortinbras is marching through the area, names Norwegian prince as his successor. Horatio, distraught at the thought of being the last survivor and living whilst Hamlet does not, says he will commit suicide by drinking the dregs of Gertrude's poisoned wine, but Hamlet begs him to live on and tell his story. Hamlet dies in Horatio's arms, proclaiming, "The rest is silence." Meanwhile, Fortinbras, who was ostensibly marching towards Poland with his army, arrives at the palace along with an English ambassador bringing news of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's deaths. Horatio promises to recount the full story of what had happened, and Fortinbras, seeing the entire Danish royal family dead, takes the crown for himself and orders a military funeral to honor Hamlet. Well, friends, in the final analysis, a demon such as Claudius is sufficient to destroy the entire clan. So friends, that's all I have for today. If you've liked my show, kindly share it. Also, press the like icon. Also, subscribe our channel by pressing the red icon, and don't forget to press the bell so that you're notified each time we upload a video. And for now, goodbye and see you soon.